Well, the pro football season has come to an end, and now the teams are geared to think about the offseason. As for the players, they are thinking about the offseason as well. And for one NFL linebacker, this is a very unique time for him. Brandon Copeland is a linebacker with the New England Patriots. He also just happens to be a University of Pennsylvania graduate who, in the offseason, teaches here at the Wharton School. He has a Life 101 class, which deals with financial literacy, which is a topic he is very passionate about. Stories have been written about his goal to put away most of his earnings from playing football so that he has a strong savings when his football career comes to an end. And he is now taking Life 101 to the public. By the way, you can find out more at www.life101.io. And a pleasure to have Brandon Copeland joining us here on the show. Brandon, thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure. My pleasure, man.
So before we get into your work at Wharton in the off season, I want to touch on football for a second because, as I said, this is a very unique season, unlike any we've ever seen. What was it like for you playing and being part of all the protocols and all the process?
Yeah, I think, I'm fortunate that I was a veteran player with a veteran mind at this time, right? Because I told some of the rookies during the season, I don't envy you right now, right? Like you have to learn so many different things. And right now you're coming into a league where you could be getting ready for practice and hey, practice is canceled. Everything is virtual. Somebody just tested positive for COVID. What? Hold on. Like that's never happened. Look, we're literally going through on a day-to-day basis and there's so many different unknowns and variables. For the first time in my life, I did not practice for an entire week. And besides one walk-through practice, jog-through practice, and then played a football game, right? And you're not doing this on a high school level or middle school level, right? This is the pros. And I just remember being like, what is going on right now, right? So I think, the biggest thing is, amazingly, it's crazy. Like we're at the Super Bowl, right? We made it all the way through. And there were definitely some tougher spots than others. But like I said, through the entire years, like the decision makers and people trying to continue to keep the season going and keep players safe and all those things, like hats off to them because it was not a job that many people would envy. And you're just learning on the fly. So for me as a player, I saw so many different things that I never ever thought I'd see while playing football, right? And then also I think you had to balance being you had your routine, like being an NFL player, like especially being a veteran when you get older, like you realize the difference between year one, year two, you're younger. Sometimes you don't even need to stretch, right? You got them young joints, as we like to say, right? As you get older, it's like I need my routine, I need this stretch, I need this recovery, I need this masseuse, I need this, you have your checklist throughout the week. This year you couldn't really do those things because you couldn't expose yourself to outside contact and things like that. So it was definitely different on the field and off the field for players.
So now you're into your off season and you're doing your workout to stay in shape. But as I said, you're going to be teaching your Life 101 class at Wharton coming up. What was it that drew you to financial literacy and the issues around it in the first place?
Yeah, I think, growing up, obviously having an opportunity to go to a school like Penn, be a part of the Wharton School of Business, right? But just growing up and understanding that money was important. However, we did not know how to put money to work for us, right? And then going and being introduced to these worlds, these investment banks and hedge funds, and seeing how people thought about their money totally differently than I'd been taught to use my own, it just kind of opened my eyes more and more and more, right? Kept just peeling back the onion, so to speak. And then finally being in the NFL, having your phone, your email, your inboxes just be flooded with people saying, hey, have you ever thought about this? Hey, have you ever thought about this type of insurance, this type of tax strategy policy, this type of investment? Some for good, some for bad, but ultimately, the good stuff, it was really positive, life-changing, wealth creating stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, why didn't my mother know this? Right? Like, why didn't my roommate from college, like I want them to know these things, right? Like, so why are we waiting until you reach a certain level, so to speak, for us to have these conversations? So that's where Life 101 began, and that's where it started. And we've been going 3 years strong now.
And I think it's interesting that you're teaching this at the university level, and at least have been the last couple of years, because we've talked on the show so much about needing more financial literacy at the high school level or middle school and even grade school. But
Yeah.
you're talking about kids coming into college still needing a lot of this information.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's I think a lot of people just assume that you know these things or you'll pick it up over time. But as I tell my students, we had class yesterday, 2 + 2 = 4. Sounds like a really stupid question, right? But if I ask you about your credit, or if I ask you about a 401k, or I ask you about a Roth IRA, or different terms, some people might say, "Oh, we know those things." Well, if I ask you to explain it, you're like, well, no one's ever really explained it to me. I just, they told me I should do it, right?
Yeah.
So we really want to just dive into these things and have these conversations. As simple as buying your first home, right? I remember buying my first house in 2017, and since then I've gotten into real estate, so I've seen a lot more purchases and sales and things like that. But my first one, my wife called me, and I was in Detroit playing at the time, and she was like, "Hey, does everything look right in this closing package?" And I'm like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
the number is what they said it will be, so I hope it's right. But literally last week, I'm refinancing a home that I have rent to own in Maryland. And I go through the closing disclosure with educated eyes, and I find $2,117 that they charged me incorrectly on. So they literally are, "Oh, we're sorry, Mr. Copeland, we're going to remove that," and all those things. But if I didn't find that, if I didn't look at those things or know how to, I'd be out $2,000. And that's
Yeah.
a lot of money, right? My
Yeah.
accountant came to class yesterday. He came to class as a guest speaker. Again, we do this at Life 101 with Penn, and then also life101.io, as you mentioned earlier, opening it up to anyone, to the public, right? And my accountant comes to class and he says 50% of the time, like 30 to 40% of pay stubs are incorrect, right? There's some type of error in the formula, human error, but most people aren't checking their pay stubs, right? Or 50% of the time the IRS sends a notice, 50% of the time they are wrong. But most people don't know that. We don't have that education, so we don't know to ask those types of questions and inquire further. We just assume that, hey, they got to be right.
So how important do you see the .io part of this now, as you want to take this more to the general public? And again, going off of a little bit what I said earlier, is that we talk about the lack of financial literacy education at the high school level.
Mhm.
That obviously plays itself out as people get older, and once they do get their job and try and go for a house, mistakes can be made that maybe they wouldn't even consider.
Yeah, no. So to speak on that directly, so Dan, what we've done is we my final exam, and even actually we created it so now the courses throughout the course, my students have to teach high school students these things. So
Right.
we've been using that. We started the first year, we literally had 100 Philadelphia high school students come to UPenn, visit the campus, tour the campus. A lot of the kids had never ever knew that this was around the corner from them and a possibility. So one, you feel good showing them that opportunity and giving them that access, right? But then two, now we split my high school students up into different groups: budgeting, investing, buying a house, credit, things like that. And then now they spoke and taught these things to the high school students. So one, they're teaching it on a high school level so that you have a very good understanding of it if you're able to teach it on a high school level. But then two, now the conversations those kids were having leaving the place were, "Hey man, we should be talking about investing in Apple. Maybe Nike, man. I don't know. I kind of like Nike a little better. I'm wearing the shoes, but
Yeah.
that is life changing." And so to answer your question directly, like that's my goal. Is I think the college is too late, to be quite honest with you. It's not too late. It's never too late. Excuse my language right there, right? It's not too late. It's just we should be talking about these things in middle school and high school because, like you said, these things matter, right? How many
Yeah.
times have we sat through classes and courses where you literally know in the middle of it, I am never going to use any of this stuff. I remember sitting in math classes where, no offense to the mathematicians out there, but I remember sitting there calculating tangents of angles and sines of angles. And I always thought, hey, if I ever really need this, I'm going to put it into Google. And if I don't have Google, then guess what? I'm just not going to answer it, right? It's just, it's not going to get answered. But your credit, you're going to need. Buying a house, you're going to need. Investing, if you want to, you should understand it. You might not need it, but you probably could use it. Budgeting, right? Taxes, all of these things. And that's when we, I'm so glad that Penn took the leap of faith with me years ago. But like I said, hey, how many people can guarantee that every student in this class will actually use this information one day?
Sure.
What's our loss here? Like, the worst case scenario, I'm a terrible professor. And, we do it 1 year, but all these young people, they know a little bit more about paying back their student loans, right? Paying that debt off, or their credit card. So, it's been a fun ride, but to answer your question directly, my goal is to make sure that middle school students have these things, high school students have these things, because not all people have an opportunity to come to, higher education or Penn or anything, and they're still going to need this information.
Brandon, thanks very much for your time. Greatly appreciated. All the best in the off season, and hopefully at some point we will see you on campus once we get back to campus. Thanks, Brandon.
So thank you for having me, Dan. Take care, man.
Thank you. Brandon Copeland, NFL linebacker, and he's at Wharton teaching Life 101. And by the way, as we remind you, you can go to life101.io if you'd like to check it out and maybe get involved. And you don't even have to be a student at the University of Pennsylvania.